Hello and welcome to In Search of the Crystal Skull, an epic adventure into the realm of mediocrity. My name is Aaron.
My name is Patricia.
And today we're going to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and this is actually be a long overdue one for us, because it actually was released a couple of months ago, actually April, would you believe?
Yes.
And now we're here in November finally talking about it. So.
Yeah, and as with the making of this podcast, we're going to post this up on Thanksgiving, so for everybody who is celebrating that, happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, so this currently sits at a very sexy 69% on Rotten Tomatoes. So yeah, we're going to talk about this, but to be honest, so the first, I mean, just to do some background on this, when we first were introduced to the idea of Sonic the Hedgehog being in a movie, and then basically we got the ugly Sonic trailer, we all kind of crawled into a bit of a cringe position. Really,
yes, we did. In fact, my friend Tom and I, we even discussed an entire podcast just on that first Sonic trailer about how just polarizing a lot of people felt, not only with the ugly Sonic design, but also with the fact that they had Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise playing.
Yeah, and then ugly Sonic became the hero of Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, which now in 20 years' time, some people are going to want to unearth what era we were living in at that time.
Exactly. Just the fact that we have this very awkward looking particular depiction of Sonic the Hedgehog, who's like this scraggly guy with teeth and just awkward eyes and just awful CGI. And people are just wondering, this is what we could have had.
Yeah, but now we actually got a redesign of Sonic, which actually ended up bankrupting the company who designed him, which I think is, and so, after Sonic the Hedgehog and after the massive success it became, I think it only became natural that we were going to get a second movie, and in fact, we were even told straight up, at the very end of the Sonic the Hedgehog, we were going to get a second movie, because Tails was obviously, put in as the additional character in the post-credit scene.
Yes, he did, and basically just teasing everybody. It's oh, you thought this was going to be a standalone feature? Oh, no. If you stayed by the credits, look who's going to be coming. It's Tails. And it makes a lot of sense, because this is the Sonic movie that was able to have Sonic as his own character, and very similar to the first game, it was only Sonic and Eggman. And now in the second game, as well as in the second movie, it kind of stretching a little bit, because it's going off for a little bit of a Mortal Kombat 9 situation, in which you have a mixture between the first 3 Mortal Kombat storylines and characters all meshed into this reboot. It's kind of like a similar case in which we have the second Sonic movie, and this time we not only have Tails, but we also have Knuckles as well, which only was appearing in the third game, which was Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Yeah.
So, the story basically is that Sonic now exists in the human world, and is basically, he seems to have found a place where he can grow up to find his ultimate purpose, which is going to be, we're going to talk about later on in the movie, but, Sonic ends up kind of doing the cold open, I guess you could say, and basically there's these bank robbers who are robbing the bank, and Sonic says to basically elect himself basically to save the day to the city's not so grateful nature. So he ends up making a gigantic mess of it all, and basically smashes the bank, the money truck into an amusement park, I think it was, and and it didn't turn out so well. He was trying to present himself as a hero, and everyone was kind of pointing out dude, you kind of made a complete mess of everything.
It kind of reminds me a lot of the tropes in superhero movies nowadays, in which you have these superheroes who are just starting out and they just make a mess into things that makes it a lot worse.
You know what it reminds me of?
What's that?
Team America World Police. Do you remember, they destroyed Paris in order to defeat the terrorists, and didn't even actually end up defeating them. They ended up just smashing Paris because of it.
Right.
That's Sonic the Hedgehog in this movie, pretty much.
I guess so. I guess it definitely just showcases that, Sonic is going for the classic superhero origin, in which he's just starting off. He wants to save humanity because he has now officially called this dimension his home after traveling through multiple dimensions with his rings, and he was able to finally find a family, and he was able to finally become more or less acquainted with what society has to offer in this small little town in Green Hills. So he's trying to basically make amends of it, and as we saw in the beginning of the movie, it basically just doesn't turn out very well.
No. So, enter Dr. Robotnik, who is now escaped from the Mushroom World, and no, it's not the Mushroom Kingdom from Super Mario World.
Yeah, that would have been really interesting. Like, if at least... It's actually funny because one of the mushrooms that Eggman was using so that he can be able to try to make his escape out of the mushroom dimension and back into Earth looked like a mushroom from the Super Mario Brothers franchise. It was like the red mushroom with the white spots all over it. So maybe that was like their little callback to it.
I just wonder, like, this is probably more Duke Nukem than it is, like, Sonic the Hedgehog, but, I'm really surprised they didn't, like, the fact that they must have known at that point that there was going to be a Mario movie, that they were going to, like, take a jab at it at some point, I would have thought, but, because, I don't know, maybe that rivalry is dead now, because now Sonic is now on Nintendo consoles. But
let's be honest, when it comes to, like, rivalry between Sonic and Mario, the only closest equivalent we have to that is, like, the Olympic Games and the sports games. Not so much as like...
But those are friendly rivalries, though.
Exactly.
They're not like... And even they're in Smash Brothers as well, but, like, even then, like, it's not saying that, the rivalries that go in Smash Brothers are canon to the actual stories of the Nintendo characters.
Unfortunately, I think the days of the 8 and 16-bit eras with Sonic going up against Mario are pretty much done.
Yeah, pretty much. So, we are introduced to also Knuckles in all of this, and so his whole story is that he was a part of a mighty clan of echidnas, and then he was told to stay behind by his father. His father also, obviously, and his tribe basically got killed, and basically he's now the one who has to try to restore honor to his kind, if you will. So he's basically trying to find the Chaos Emerald, and in order to do that. So, but that's his whole thing going forward. I've got to be honest, like, this, we've had a lot of renditions of Knuckles over the time. We've had him with attitude in the games. We've had him, like, kind of like be kind of like a hardhead, but not so much like, as we see here in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And I don't know, like, what do we think of this Knuckles character compared to all the other ones that we've seen in, like, all the other games?
It kind of reminds me of the original story of Knuckles from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, in which when Dr. Eggman lied to Knuckles saying that Sonic was the bad guy and he was basically going to destroy his island and that he was after the Chaos Emerald and all that kind of stuff. And so basically Knuckles believed him, and that was why he was going up against Sonic in the first place. So then it wasn't until much later on in the game in which he realizes that Dr. Robotnik was lying to him, and so that's when in later games they actually paired up together. So it kind of almost in a way resembles a little bit of the video games, while actually at the same time taking a little bit of his personality from like the adventure series, in which you do find out about the echidnas and their connection with the Chaos Emeralds, and a little bit of Sonic X, where we do have this little bit of a crude and kind of tough attitude. Not so much of the meathead attitude that we've seen a lot in recent Sonic games, and even with the cartoon Sonic Boom Rise. Yeah, Sonic Boom. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think, to be honest, I actually do like this this character of Knuckles. I think in this universe, and it kind of somewhat reminds me of Drax the Destroyer out of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Because of his naivete.
Yeah, like, and so it makes me wonder, as we go into later movies, like, are we going to see kind of like, not like not a softening, I think, of the character, but I think he starts to kind of gain more of an idea of like where he is. I think, and probably starts taking selfie. So I was having some fun, really, like, starts being kind of a bit of a goof himself. Like,
sure. Again, depending on which depiction of Knuckles they want to lean more towards, but yeah, I think for the most part that Knuckles in this movie is really well played, especially with the voice of Idris Elba, who is able to give him such a really cool, tough attitude, but at the same time have this bit of curiosity of not understanding how the dimension of Earth works.
Yeah, like, he's not, he doesn't play him generically, though. Like, he's not generic, tough guy, like, things like that, like, or, tribesman, something like that. Like, that he gives him a bit of sympathy, and he gives him, there's some more in-depthness, I think, about how he feels as Idris Elba's been given good direction, I think, in this. And I think that's actually the one thing I think I would say about most of the characters in all of this. Like, I think when the director turned around and said, okay, this is where this particular character is at this particular time, I think he goes quite in depth from the looks of it, about where these people are at. Okay, some of them I think are probably a bit overplayed, like like the whole like wedding scene and things like that. That's one thing I will say about this movie, is that they put a lot of direction into things that aren't really related to Sonic, which is kind of a bit distracting. Really, it's kind of like the human characters in Sonic 06. 6. It's like they just kind of feel out of place.
Yeah, and I get it. For a lot of people who probably were seeing the first Sonic movie, they were wondering, okay, what are the characters like in the second Sonic movie? But it leans more towards a direction about like another side character that was barely in the first movie and who was pretty annoying.
Yeah.
And then she has this whole subplot about her getting married to somebody who turns out to be a secret agent who was trying to go after Robotnik, and then
But they kind of played off for laughs, though, and it's kind of like,
did.
it to me, it just wasn't like, as our phones are going off, I just feel like it was just, unnecessary.
Yeah.
I think, when the whole, the confession of the love, saying, I wanted to marry you and everything like that, but work got in the way and stuff like that, and then you saw, the plane, by the way, the Tails plane basically comes.
Yes, I loved it.
That was a good, and nod to that. But, even then, during that scene when all of that was playing along, it was kind of like, can we get back to Sonic the Hedgehog, please?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was kind of a complaint that we kind of had in the first movie, but we understood why it happened because it was an origin story. We need to know about them. But here, it's like, okay, we already know about these characters, and we can just basically not worry too much about the humans and then focus more on Sonic and Tails and Eggman and we have Knuckles mixed into it, and now we finally have the Chaos Emeralds. It's like, okay, for all the people who are wondering, where were the Chaos Emeralds in the first movie? Well, here they are, which I guess makes a lot of sense, considering that even though we kind of got Chaos Emeralds in the first game as well, you just collected them just for the sake of collecting them. It didn't make you turn into Super Sonic like in the second game.
One thing I think that is really, one thing we definitely are talking about in this movie is definitely more the characters than we are the story, because, I guess you could say the characters kind of drive the story, I guess you could say, but this is the one part where the movie I would say that I'm not really focused. Obviously we know the story of Sonic at this point, and it looks like they're kind of like going in the direction of like the games from what we can see. But but on top of that, it's not just following the game and just kind of this is what happens in the game, and therefore that they put on a lot more than just that. Sonic is still very immature for. He's he's a Sonic Hedgehog with a young teenage hedgehog.
Yeah, exactly.
So of course he's gonna be that. Yeah.
In the modern versions of Sonic that we've seen throughout the over 30 years of the franchise, Sonic is 15 and Knuckles is 16, Tails is 8 or 9 depending on what it is, and then Robotnik is middle-aged. So yeah, they've kept consistent with this for decades. So seeing Sonic as like this naive, rambunctious teenager makes a lot of sense because that's exactly who he is.
Yeah, and so kudos for actually going in that direction, I think, with the characters, because it does make them relatable. So but Tails is interesting because he while he has all this genius, in him to invent all these things and be able to survive on his own, he still feels like he does make mistakes, and he just gets all wound up about those mistakes that he makes.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense if you've ever played the Sonic Adventure games, because in Sonic Adventure 1, the whole point of Tails' story arc was that he wanted to prove to himself that he can be able to rise against all the basically the mistakes that he's made, and also that he's had a ton of insecurities because he always saw Sonic as a role model. He says that Sonic is the best person that he's ever met up with. He sees him as a big brother. He's always alongside with him. So, and Tails is just as smart as Robotnik or Eggman, depending on your depiction, when it comes to machines. So Eggman and Tails have always had this bit of rivalry when it came to mechanics. And so in the last bit of Sonic Adventure 1, that was when Tails was able to prove to himself that he was able to stand strong. And I guess when looking into the story arc, we have Knuckles' story arc, which kind of leans a little bit towards a mixture between Sonic Adventure 1 and the Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And then Tails is a bit more or less about the first Sonic Adventure game, because Sonic 2, there wasn't really much of a story arc with Tails other than, he was there. So I guess they just needed to bring more of the later games into Tails' personality.
But the one thing I really give them credit for in this is that it's not just that, here are the characters and this is what everyone wants to see, and we'll just kind of just play them as, float around on the screen and basically just doing things, it's just, there was really a lot of thought put into Sonic Sonic, into Tails, into Knuckles, and and the like. Even Robotnik even has interesting characteristics about him, like wanting to basically become this most powerful scientist, and everything like that. And so I think they really in Jim Carrey, obviously he came back for like just this one time for basically this, and whether obviously we can probably go into this later on, whether he's going to come back or not, we don't know. But obviously we're going to go into spoilers in this as well, so sorry if you've not seen this since April. But Robotnik basically grabs the Chaos Emerald, basically becomes like this very cool looking supervillain from us. I'm not saying that he wasn't cool looking already, but he obviously evolved now into what the character that we know to kind of look like, but now even looking even more powerful. He uses his power of towards the end to, well, we thought he was going to create the Death Egg at that point, but surprisingly he actually decided to build this giant robot, which by the way actually looks like one of the robots from the Sonic the Hedgehog games.
Yeah, exactly.
So so that was a good nod to do that, I think.
And not only was it, there was like a lot of like really nice nods to like the classic Sonic games. Like, for example, when Eggman was meeting up with his assistant for the first time in like over a year that he has been in this mushroom dimension, he opened up a coffee shop, and the coffee shop just so happened to be called Mean Bean, as in like Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean machine from the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, and there's one thing I'll give this movie credit for, is that they did some really good nods to some of the Sonic, we talk about Sonic Adventures, we talk about Mean Bean Machine, which is like
like a really
who would have thought we were talking about Mean Bean Machine in all of this.
Exactly. And also there was another nice little nod in which when Sonic and Tails and were trying to, find the Chaos Emeralds before Robotnik and Knuckles did, and they were just going through the mountain. You had a combination of two references from two games where, Sonic was in the helicopter and then he just like grabbed a piece of the helicopter and then just swirled down, which is a reference to Sonic Adventure 2. And then he was just like snowboarding down, which is a reference to Sonic CD.
So, again, like if you watch this movie and you're a big, massive Sonic fan, you're not going to be disappointed. Like it's all there pretty much at this point. Like I don't think. The other thing I could say that there wasn't a reference to was probably Sonic Spinball. But,
yeah, exactly.
He didn't go into a pinball machine or anything like that.
No, there was no sewer level anyway, as far as I remember. They went to Norway though, so there's a scene right there where you have like Sonic and Tails, and they're trying to find the Chaos Emerald, and they just settle in this little pub / inn at Norway, and then they were thinking that they were going to be beat up when they were challenged, and then it just turned out to be a dance contest.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we end up with like this, at the very end, like obviously we get the final battle, is like is pretty epically done, and it's the whole evolution that we have with Sonic is that he finally found his own kind, like he finally found Tails, he finally found Knuckles, so you feel like he's got his own team together.
Yeah, exactly, and he was able to find out eventually that. We have Eggman, who was going to later betray him, saying, well, you led me over to the Chaos Emerald, I don't need you anymore. Mm-hmm. And so that was when Knuckles realized about the importance of trust and friendship. Yeah.
So, one thing that we don't know in this movie is that the fate of Dr. Robotnik himself, because all we just see him just kind of like when they beat the robot, that he just basically falls into a pile of smoke, and then we have no idea what happened after that.
Yeah, exactly. So, it kind of reminds me of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: Secret of the Ooze, in which you have Shredder drinking the ooze, and then he turns into Super Shredder, and then like a whole bunch of like boards just fall on him, and then that was pretty much it for him. Because
that was really disappointing, really.
Yeah.
He went out.
Yeah, because he wasn't in Ninja Turtles 3.
No, he wasn't. And mind you, Ninja Turtles 3, I think, was itself kind of disappointment, really, regardless of whether we had a Shredder in or not.
Exactly.
But here's the thing, I wouldn't compare this into a TMNT situation, I think, for Dr. Robotnik. I think maybe what they're doing is, I think they're just keeping the seat warm, I guess, for Jim Carrey if he decides to come back for Sonic 3. We don't know if he is going to or not. I think it's a bit...
we already know from various interviews from Jim Carrey that he was so fed up with how Hollywood is at the moment that he just decided that he wanted to retire.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to see. I guess the next conversation we can have, well, I imagine we'll get into Sonic 3, stuff, I think, a bit later on. But there is one thing, I think, towards the end of the movie that we were very, very surprised at, and something that, Robotnik had been working on, like, basically for the last 50 years. And if anyone doesn't know what that reference is, basically we said, oh my god, Project Shadow. And Shadow the Hedgehog was unveiled
Oh my
on that.
gosh, yeah. So...
just to say that's quite astounding, really, when you really think about it, because Shadow the Hedgehog was not very well received when he first came onto the scene.
No, he was not. No. But I guess at this point in time, he has become much more of an icon as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. So I guess it's not too much of a big surprise. I mean, the one thing that we forgot to mention was like leading towards the end of the movie, in which when eventually Dr. Robotnik loses the Chaos Emeralds, and then Sonic has it, and he turns into Super Sonic. Mm-hmm. That was awesome.
That was very awesome, and I think here's the thing. Like the one thing I would say is that if you are a massive Sonic fan, I guarantee you in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, you're going to find a lot of things that you're going to like in this movie.
Yeah. And of course there are some problems with it. I mean, we already talked about the wedding scene and the human characters just not being that necessary.
We're just not interested in the human characters. I really hope in Sonic 3 that they learn from this. Like, we are fixated on the Sonic characters and maybe the people who are around Sonic that are trying to lead him on his quest. That's it. That's all the humans should be in this movie. They shouldn't be like in the main scenes. They shouldn't be like having their own story arcs and things like that. The main arc here is Sonic and the characters and their development in all of this. Right. And anything, the human characters are there for support. They're not there to kind of take up scenes. At least in my opinion, anyway. Exactly. Am I being too cruel by saying that?
No, not at all. I think a lot of people's general consensus is that the humans, for the most part, were just the least interesting part of the movie.
Yeah. So now I guess we go into Sonic 3, I guess, which is going to be like, what is Shadow the Hedgehog? I guess Shadow the Hedgehog is going to be the villain, I guess, in this, because he's
because it's kind of funny that they skipped Sonic CD completely, because if you remember that there was Metal Sonic, that's where he was first introduced, and
I really thought Metal Sonic was going to be the next villain.
Me too. I thought it was going to be Metal Sonic next, and I thought that we were going to incorporate Amy Rose into this.
Well, we might still be able to. I mean,
but
who knows?
They just completely skipped over to Sonic Adventure 2, where we first got introduced to Shadow the Hedgehog, because if you remember, Sonic Adventure 1 was focusing on Chaos, the corrupted Chow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're leading up towards a pretty detailed story involving with Dr. Robotnik's grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, and this whole 50-year plan involving with the creation of Shadow the Hedgehog, and then his granddaughter Maria, where she had like a disease, and then Shadow and Maria had this really nice relationship with each other, and then Maria was killed off, and then Shadow had amnesia. So are we going to go into more of that story?
It would be, I mean, it's going to be strange to kind of glue those two things together, because you're going to have to, I mean, not to say you shouldn't dedicate significant time to a new character, to Shadow, because he has such a complex backstory and everything like that, but at the same time, hopefully he's not going to be a situation where you're taking too much screen time from, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles.
Exactly, and especially since, this is around the time in which when Shadow the Hedgehog was becoming, really popular, because the 2000s culture was becoming more along the lines of, gritty, dark, edgy video games.
Yeah, and that's what Sega had in mind when they first created Shadow the Hedgehog, the American audience, when they were doing that, because they thought, oh, hang on a second, we did this for, we made Sonic more edgy and making him an attitude and everything like that, compared to the Japanese version of Sonic, and, it pretty much won them the console war, I think you could say, by doing that, but at the same time, they went overkill with Shadow, and people just kind of saw through it, really. They realized that this character is not, they gave him an outlandish gun, they gave him they gave
him a motorcycle. There was a good and bad ending, depending on if you wanted to go for more of killing people or saving people.
Yeah, it didn't work. And that's the problem with this version of Sonic game. It didn't work, and I think the one thing I'm a bit concerned about is that I really hope they don't. I mean, I really hope when they introduce this character that he's not going to end up being kind of like the what's that name? What's that character? What was that? When Homer Simpson in The Simpsons became Poochie? Yeah, Poochie. Yeah. Hopefully he's not going to become the Poochie of all of this.
Yeah, and we're gonna have a scene in which when you have Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles crowding around with Shadow. It's like, okay, what's it gonna be, Shadow? What are you gonna do? And then he's like, I have to go. My planet needs me.
Yeah.
Yes, Shadow dies when he's on his way back to his home planet.
Yeah, hopefully it's not going to be that situation. Well, but anyway, he's got a movie basically to prove himself, so I think that's going to be a thing. But, I mean, the way that they're building this up, it sounds to me like he's going to basically be a misunderstood villain, I think, in all of this, and then maybe he's going to find out a bit more about his past, and then after that he might turn, like the same way Knuckles did in this. Like, he was an antagonist in this movie before he turned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's always been depicted as the anti-hero, so he's leaning more towards, like, certain sides. The whole point of his character is so he can be able to know about his mysterious past. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether Sonic and Tails and Knuckles can be able to connect with that. I mean, the only way that they were able to connect with it was because, it involved with Eggman. And Eggman, as you know, is descended from either Robotnik and Maria, and Shadow has a really close relationship with them. So we'll just have to see how they're able to streamline that story, especially for those fans who have never played a Sonic game.
Yeah. I mean, do we stick with Shadow in this? Like, if it's going to be like the Shadow story that we're going to go with, I mean, do you think they will find time to introduce more Sonic characters in this? Or do you think they will find enough time to, introduce other elements from this?
Well, I mean, if we are going to introduce like other characters that does relate to Shadow, I remember in Sonic Heroes, they introduced Rouge the Bat, and then one of the...
Rouge the Bat would be interesting.
Yeah, Rouge the Bat would be really interesting, and then there's also one of the robots that Eggman had that went rogue, that didn't follow Eggman's orders anymore, which, by the way, we didn't even really see that much in this movie. Like, none of the classic E29 or any of those robots that we've seen in other Sonic Adventure games and Sonic Heroes and stuff like that. We just see like drones, which fair enough, but still it's not like the iconic Eggman robots that we've been acquainted with in the previous games. So it would be interesting if they were to incorporate like other characters, like introducing Amy into this. And I don't know about introducing other characters. Like, I mean, I don't want to see Silver. God, please no.
Well, I think I guarantee you. I think people will start saying like, "A good grief." I mean, if we get to Big the Cat in like Sonic the Hedgehog,
jeez, no.
Good grief.
I do not want to see Big the Cat.
No, I don't think
I
anybody
need
does.
help finding Froggy. No.
So, I think somewhere down the line, I mean, I don't know, like, I mean, if people are going to still see Sonic movies, because, they're still going to make Sonic movies.
Oh, yeah,
that's the
of
thing.
course they
yeah,
are.
Exactly. So I think somewhere down the line, if they really want to go as far to see some of these other, less liked Sonic characters, then, they're going to put their money in and they're going to go to the box office and, they're going to tell, the studio what they want to do.
Yeah, so. And we even talked about this in the first podcast, that I feel that Sonic the Hedgehog was like one of the leading examples of setting a new standard for adapting video games.
Yeah.
Because since then, we have gotten the Castlevania Netflix series, which has done gangbusters. And then we had other ones that were able to bring in people that were not acquainted with it. Arcane, for example. Like, I have never played League of Legends, and for most people who've watched Arcane, they've never played League of Legends either, but it generated so many people to tune in. Mm-hmm. And then there's also...
Well, I mean, this is the thing, like, you don't necessarily need to be a fan of a video game to enjoy a movie. People come to a movie to basically get involved into the story, regardless of what it is. And if you make video game adaptations and bring them to the big screen, and as long as you tell a good story around it, you don't necessarily need to know that this was based on a game.
Yeah, like for another example I can think of on the top of my head recently is the Halo live action series. My sister started watching a few episodes and she liked it, and I know that for the Halo hardcore fans they hate it, but for the general audience who's never played a Halo game, they like it.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, it's different than compared to like something like Star Wars or something.
Yeah.
And also, we're going to have other adaptations coming up in the future, like The Last of Us HBO series is going to be coming out next year. And a lot of people are really, really interested in that. In fact, I'm kind of surprised because I thought that people would kind of be burned out from it since we've had The Walking Dead for over a decade.
Yeah, well, I think, again, like, Sonic the Hedgehog has basically become successful, and I guarantee you that's probably propelled Nintendo to, like, push, the Mario movie, and which they're doing with Illumination, and also now they've got Nintendo Pictures now.
Exactly.
So, like,
yeah. So
exactly.
they saw what Sonic was doing. It's kind of like the reverse, in which Yuji Naka was playing off the original Super Mario Brothers over and over and over again, so that he can be able to have the gameplay mechanics of how to create his own iconic character. And he was able to do it with the first Sonic the Hedgehog game on the Sega Genesis. And we saw that other people were able to try to copy off of it. Most of them failed and others succeeded. But yeah, it seems like we have another reversal in which, Sonic became like the new standard of having all of these adaptations based off of video games that was able to generate fans of people who've never played the video games. The Witcher series, Castlevania, Detective Pikachu, Arcane, and now recently The Last of Us, and now the Mario movies. So we have essentially a standard in which that, hey, just because this is based off of a video game doesn't mean that we don't stick to the elements of what the video games made great, as well as introducing them to an audience that's never even played them. So I think that now the standards of where Sonic 2 is, in terms of like, this is the sequel of the movie that was able to generate a lot of people to getting more acquainted with Sonic the Hedgehog, and especially since when they were working on this movie, it was the 30th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog, and they made a big deal about it, and they wanted to give it the respect. So
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing that I was so disappointed with this movie, and once again, this is a complaint that I had with the first movie, the music.
Well,
Come on, where's Crush 40?
well, I think that's a great question, actually. Like, I mean, why is it that they've not been drafted into, like, putting some
I
soundtrack
spoke
into
to
this movie?
Johnny Giueli, and he, even though that he was kind of saying, even though that they haven't called me yet, I made my request, and we'll see if Sega responds to it. But I mean, this is what the fans want. They want to hear the songs from Crush 40. They want to hear Live and Learn. If Shadow is going to be in this movie, I mean...
Yeah, everyone loves his theme song.
Exactly. Everyone wants to hear his theme song. I mean, even though it's like dark and broody, but still a...
But that's his character.
Exactly. That's his
The
character.
one thing I will give credit for, the only one thing I'll give credit for in Shadow the Hedgehog in the actual video game is that the Crush 40 music of him, like, the introducing him as the character in this, at least it fits.
Yeah, I Am is a great song which is able to tie in with both him as an anti-hero and him as the hero. So again, it makes a lot of sense if you listen to it in the songs. And a lot of the Sonic games really fit well into like the cool rock and rollness of Sonic the Hedgehog himself. A lot of people want to be able to tune into this music and be able to say, oh man, I remember this scene from the games and the music is awesome on its own. So yeah, unfortunately we still haven't had it yet.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just like, just arrogance, I think, from on the other side of the movie studio, or like, Crush 40, like, okay, the Sonic fans know who they are, but we've got all these other people to kind of like,
exactly.
cater for as well.
We need to have like, the songs that are really popular that is in the top 40 in the Billboard charts.
Yeah, like, just this, they should have learned the lessons from Gangsta's Paradise, but that's just me.
Oh my god.
I know. All right then, so I think we talked this movie out, I think, a little bit. So let's rate this, shall we? So it's a solid 8 at least.
Yeah.
Okay, it's got problems, but it's not necessarily a bad. It's not medium. Even though we talk about reviewing movies that are unnecessarily good, not necessarily bad. I've got to say, in regards to the tomatometer, this movie, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't have all that many problems. I think it's a solid 8.
Yeah, me too. I think it's an 8 as well. My gripes with it obviously was the wedding scene and introducing more storylines with the humans and no Crush 40, but other than that, they were able to improve a lot from the first movie. We got to see more of the characters. We got to see a lot of iconographies that had become iconic with the video games that has been incorporated into the movie. And there were some funny moments. There were some genuine sweet moments. So yeah, I think that this movie is a great total package of what we get to see in terms of a movie based off of a popular video game series. So yes, I do think that it was a massive improvement over the first one.
I agree. Okay, so that makes it for another episode of In Search of the Crystal Skull, and we believe actually we have another episode potentially that might be coming up. However, we are going to let you know about that because we have no idea how the tomato episode is going to swing. So
yeah, well, I mean, even though that early reviews have showcased that it may swing towards one side or the other, but we're just going to wait it out to see where it lands, and who knows? I mean, maybe we'll talk about it pretty soon, and if not, then I'm sure we'll talk about some other things for Crystal Skull in the future.
You could say it's a rather strange situation. You dropped that hint. Okay, all right then. Thanks everybody. We will see you once again for In Search of the Crystal Skull very soon. Take care and bye-bye for now.
See you later.